Okay, hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on mental health in Asia. For those I don't know or haven't met, my name's Paul Endicott. I'm the CEO of Grit Search. Grit Search is a specialist recruitment and HR technology company focusing on identifying talent and in the areas of digital and technology in Asia. So we're delighted today to be hosting this panel on mental health. Just a bit of background, and now I'm going to come to introducing the panel. When we started Grit Search, we wanted to look at a cause that we felt we were passionate about and that was, and maybe required a bit more discussion in the Asia region. And mental health is something that personally I've had family impacted by. So it's something that, you know, it's tough. We all have good days. We all have bad days. We don't always talk about them, and it can be quite challenging. So we felt this was something that resonated, but also was a cause which is probably underserved in Asia and not as spoken about as much in Asia. So we're fortunate to know Rob Stevenson. Rob sits on our panel today. Rob is the founder of Inside Out, and he's going to be talking about the work he's done as a mental health campaigner in terms of destigmatizing mental health in the workplace, and work he's done with organizations around developing strategies for that, as well as his own personal journey. We also have Sophie Smith. Sophie's the APAC HR director from Experian. As well as Wendy Montgomery, who is the Chief People Officer from Crypto.com, and Tiffany Kaur, who's the Marketing Director from Grit Search. So thank you all very much for being part of the panel today. I'm going to pass over to Rob just quickly to really get this started. And Rob, maybe you could introduce yourself and also the form that you've been putting together to help people simply convey how they're feeling.
Sure, thank you, Paul, and welcome everybody. So yeah, Rob Stevenson, I'm a mental health campaigner and international speaker, and this journey for me is personal. I experienced bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 30, I'm 48 today, and after some dark times, I learned to manage my condition, and we'll talk a little bit more about that through the panel. But I did so under the radar, with only close friends and family knowing, for many, many years. And that was due to the stigma of mental illness, the fear of how I'd be perceived. And my kind of life changed in 2017, where in the UK, we started seeing many more people being open about their mental health challenges. And this was catalyzed by our princes, Prince Harry and William, speaking out. So that motivated me to share my story, which I did. And the reaction to that story was overwhelming. It was people sharing their stories back. It was people telling me about what they experienced. So I then went on a mission of changing my life to become a campaigner. And what I do at the core is focus on helping businesses and leaders come out and share their story by publishing a list of business leaders who are open about their mental health challenges. And again, we'll talk more about that. But I also do something called the Form Score. So I'm just going to share a screen with you very briefly, just to talk you through that. And it's really helping answer the question, how are you today? Because we don't often answer this question authentically. So I'm going to share how I am. I'm an 8 out of 10 today. I'm on very good form. Despite some challenges with coronavirus itself, my mental form is pretty good. And what I'd invite you to do is just reflect on these questions. So how motivated are you? What are your energy levels like? Do tasks and decisions feel easy or difficult? And how well have you slept? Have you exercised well lately, whatever that means for you? And has your diet been balanced with good nutrition? Do you have a strong sense of purpose, and are you finding that? And importantly, at the moment, how connected are you to friends, family, and colleagues? How well are you balancing stress, and how relaxed or worried are you about your finances, your financial well-being? So I'm whizzing through this because I don't want to take up too much time. So reflect on those questions and then think, where might you be on that scale today out of 10? As I say, I'm on very good form. Some of us might be kind of 5 or 6 or even a 4 or lower, but just think where you are. And I'm going to ask you to reflect on how are you today. But we're going to do that with an anonymous poll. So if you bear with me, just very quickly. So what I'd invite you to do is open up your phone and hold your camera icon, open up your camera, hold it over that QR code, and you'll see an open form poll now pop up. And what that does is give you the scale. Now, I must stress this is completely anonymous. All you're going to see are the numbers pop up. So once you've done that, please just share those, and we can see the numbers are starting to populate there. We've got some, we're averaging 7, which is good form. Again, we've got 1.5 there for the person who's a 5. Just reflect on what's driving that and think how you might be able to tweak it. So, we're averaging quite a lot of 6s and 7s, which is pretty normal during the pandemic. There's the sort of distribution, and again, for the person who's got a 4, again, not to panic. That is a sign of being human, but just think what's driving that. Is it sleep? Is it exercise? Is it connection? And then think, how might you be able to tweak it? And maybe we'll give you some ideas on the panel today. And great to see someone post a 10. It's always something to strive for. So thank you so much for doing that. It was a little exercise to warm up. But that score, the number out of 10, and the use of the word form is just a different way of thinking and acting about your mental health, which is non-threatening and can counteract the challenges of the stigma that we'll be talking about today as well. So thank you, Paul, for allowing me to do that.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I'll probably say I'm an 8 to 9 out of 10 today. I'm feeling quite good today. I'm well rested. The sun's shining in England. So for myself and Rob, we're in England at the moment. I know we've got a few people all over the place, but no, it's a good day. And we'll talk a bit more, as you say, around how you can manage your mental health a bit more. Just going through the panel, actually, it'd be great if we could just get some introductions and understand why personally you felt you wanted to be on the panel today, and also why mental health has become important to you. Maybe Sophie, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi everyone. So mental health has always been really important to me, particularly having lost a very close friend to mental illness about 2.5 years ago. It completely changed my perspective on the topic, and I think through COVID the visibility around the importance of mental well-being has really increased. Yet, unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma attached to that, be it social stigma or self-imposed stigma. So panels like these and everyone on this panel and listening to the panel play such a key role in doing their own little bit to break that stigma. And that's very much why I'm here today. And my form score, I'd probably give myself a 7.5 out of 10, 7 to 8.
Good, thanks, Sophie. And Wendy, we had a chat the other day, and I think from your perspective, obviously you've got your personal reasons as to why it's been highlighted more recently. Maybe if you could just give us a quick introduction and again your personal reasons for why you wanted to share on this panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello everyone. Yeah, it's been a difficult 6 months, and sitting at home because I was unemployed. My husband had cancer, and it came out of the blue. So it's been a really tough time because I've been sitting here. I haven't had work colleagues to interact with, although I've had, a lot of friends. It's been really lonely. And then I got a call out of the blue, on the job that I'm in now at Crypto.com. That happened super fast. And the other catalyst, to be on the panel today is because I really feel for a lot of people that don't have open space and are really cooped up at home, and they're really struggling. I just can't imagine how that would be. And it's really highlighted that for me because of a lot of our employees are in Hong Kong, and they're in lockdown now as well, even more so. So those are my main reasons.
Right. Thank you, Wendy. And Sophie just mentioned, Tiff, about social stigma, and I know we've discussed this a fair bit as well, and I think this particularly, we talked about how maybe it could be different in Asia and in terms of cultural mindsets as well around talking about how you are and mental health. What's your experience been in that regard?
Hi everyone, so just a little bit of background context on me. So born and raised in Australia, but grew up in a Chinese family, Malaysian Chinese to be more specific. So parents are quite traditional in that sense. So even being brought up in a Western country, we've always been sort of told to, not share too much information, to be able to take negativity, as something to improve on, and to, sort of just get on with it, and not to express ourselves too much. So it's been quite, I think, as a Chinese person, it can be quite frustrating, and it can be quite, difficult to share information as a result, because we've grown up, with that thinking that we should be able to handle it on our own. So especially in this COVID situation, I've also, I got let go from my previous role very suddenly, and I, currently live on my own. So that itself has been quite difficult, but things are a lot better now.
Good, thank you. And I'm going to go through a few questions really, and I think what we're looking to cover as we go through this panel is looking at how people can personally manage, but also then talking about organisations and what organisations have done and what initiatives they've done. Because certainly, as as was mentioned, I think the whole COVID-19 situation has really heightened awareness of mental health and accelerated that. And Rob, it'd be great to hear your perspectives in a little while in terms of how you've seen that come through from, from organisations you work with. But also to the audience, if you do have questions, you'll see there's a little box there where you can actually, titled Q&A, you can put questions in there, and we will try and go through those as either part of the panel as we're discussing, or alternatively at the end of the session. So just coming back to the perspective, Wendy, you mentioned about, it was very challenging for yourself, and you also talked about people being cooped up. How did you cope during that time when you weren't working, when obviously your husband was undergoing treatment, and that kind of isolation you felt at that time? How did that impact you, and how did you really, I suppose, come out of that as well, or improve from that situation?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very, very fortunate to live in a part of Singapore, and I have a really nice garden, and the street that I live in is very, very quiet. So, fortunate to live in that environment and just be able to, comfortable in taking some time out. I felt comfortable, and I needed that time to just deal with what was going on with my husband. But I think getting off my backside, I'd procrastinated for months about getting out and going for a walk. And I actually took myself out and did a 5K walk from couch to 5K, although I didn't run it. I walked really fast, and I came back, and I just felt euphoric. And you forget how important exercise is, how important it is to get out and just to do something different, and clear your head and come back, and then just deal with everything that you need to again. So that was a really important point in being isolated and getting out there and just feeling great. It really did help me a lot.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, I suppose, it can be just as simple as a walk, like you say, just to actually get out and clear your mind. And I know, Rob, you talk about this a lot in terms of mental health and how exercise is important, rest. I mean, from your perspective, having been through, the challenges you've personally been through, I mean, what's really helped you, and what would you recommend to people around improving their mental health?
It's a really big question, but a good one. So I think there are a number of drivers to our well-being and mental health, and exercise is a key one. And Wendy, I'd say it's my top priority too. And actually, the fact that I've experienced COVID has meant my ability to exercise in the way that I've done before has been impacted, which has really impacted then my form score and my mental health. But I think exercise is important, sleep is important, social connection is really important. That sense of purpose is really important, nutrition. So there's all of these aspects that are going into your mental well-being, how you're balancing stress, how you're taking breaks in the day to recover from stress. And one of my most powerful quotes I've heard, I do a lot of these sort of events about COVID, is that 100% of us will know what it is like to struggle with our mental well-being as a result of the pandemic, to one degree or another. And so for me, the most helpful tool actually in being able to come to terms with the challenges and the impact on my mental health is acceptance. It's a tool that I use when I'm experiencing a period of depression, and rather than fighting it and thinking I've got to be happy, I've got to be over there, It's accepting what's in the moment, accepting how I'm feeling right now. And I've had to really accept that I can't go and ride my bike out in the beautiful countryside like I would normally do. What I've had to do is accept that and then think, right, I can do a bit of light yoga. I can go for that little walk in the woods and get that sense of achievement and you know, and still getting the heart rate moving a little bit without triggering the impact of the virus. But I think whatever the challenges are for you as a result of the pandemic, and they will be individual based on your circumstances, I think accepting them, realignment of goals, and being present and in the moment are the most powerful tools that I've used that help me.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rob. And going on to from an organizational perspective, obviously this current climate has really heightened the awareness around mental health, but it's not a new thing. It's not just happened because of COVID, right? This has been, you know, an issue that has not always been talked about for a long time, and that's obviously why you started Inside Out. But why do you think it is now that organizations have begun to realize that managing and supporting employees' mental health is actually so important?
Again, another good question. I think that organizations are starting to understand the scale of the problem or the scale of the opportunity where mental well-being is concerned. And for example, in the UK, there was the big report, the Stevenson Pharma review that Deloitte did the analytics for, you know, which estimates the cost of mental ill health in the workplace at 105 billion. And so that is both a cost and an opportunity. I think the moves to end stigma and get people talking about mental ill health are putting it more on the radar. And we're seeing CEOs and leaders of organizations share their own experiences, which then helps transform the culture. But I think bottom line, it's the right thing to do to support your people who are your greatest assets, but it's also a great performance opportunity. So it's one of those rare cases where investing in mental health and well-being as a strategic priority is a win-win. But I think particularly during the pandemic, and because of some of the things we've mentioned, isolation, people living at home, people having increased stress levels, increased instances of mental ill health, depression numbers have doubled in the UK from a recent survey. Organizations realizing actually we need to better support people. And so that's accelerating up the agenda. So my hope for one of the legacies of this horrible pandemic are mental health has more importance in many, many organizations. And hey, we're seeing that in practice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And we just had a question from the audience, and Sophie, the question here is, what should companies do for their employees and mental health? And I know that Experian have driven a number of different initiatives. Can you share some of those initiatives that you've been doing within the organization to support your employees?
Sure, very happy to. And I think that the first myth I'd just like to bust is that this doesn't have to come with a really high budget. In fact, a lot of what we've done has been without any cost at all. So to bring it to life for you a little bit, we've put on some mindfulness sessions for colleagues in the region who wish to learn how to have more mindful moments in their days and who would get some relief from that training. So we've done that. We've provided access or re-educated people on access to mindfulness apps that are freely and readily available, often at no cost. We've done panel sessions and still doing panel sessions similar to this to try and raise awareness and almost give permission and acceptance that it is genuinely okay not to be okay, and leaders and colleagues have ups and downs, and trying to make people a little bit more vulnerable and more compassionate around one another. Mm-hmm. So going to be placing all people leaders in the business through mental health first aider training to equip them with some of the skills to spot and understand how to respond to signs of mental illness. And we've invested in an employee counselling line, which is a 24/7 service that people can ring and get immediate counselling support should they have some darker moments. So we've done a whole range of things, from measures that try and help prevent mental illness becoming a pervasive issue, to measures that are designed to just simply raise awareness and break some of the stigma. And it's often in that space where you actually don't need any budget at all. And it's hugely powerful, and it seeks to break the stigma.
Yeah, okay. And that's largely been from an organizational perspective. That was something that collectively you as an organization then drove down through the organization. I mean,
Yes.
and another question from the audience here, from Ben. From an individual perspective, in some organizations, to be frank, not all organizations are collectively looking at mental health, but there's some leaders that do want to focus on the mental health of the areas in which they operate. What are good daily practices that you would encourage leaders to do to support their teams around their mental health, if it's not necessarily being supported fully by the organization?
It's a great question. I think a quick and easy thing to do, which is hugely impactful, is to have a team check-in. So at the start of meetings, rather than rush into the task in hand, is to pose a question to the group on how they're feeling, what are they grateful for, what's on their mind, and so forth, just to understand where people are, a bit like the form score we've just heard in many ways. And that's a great leveler, and it starts to open up a sense of vulnerability in a team, and actually through that trust builds, so it's a positive outcome. I think the other thing we can all do is when we ask the question, or when we get asked the question, how are you, or are you okay, is to really listen for the response to that question, because sometimes it's the people with the biggest smiles that are actually suffering the most. And I think too often we just walk past an answer of, I'm great, thanks, how are you? And unless, we hear a true feeling, I'm great, thanks, how are you is not a feeling. So leaders can dig into that and say, how are you really doing? What's going on for you today? How are you showing up? How can I help? And I think asking these questions that come from a place of compassion are really powerful, and any leader can start there. And I think what that leader would find is momentum builds around them, and people look to them and their team for suggestions on how to replicate that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's one point I'd add on that as well, and I agree with everything you said, Sophie, but I think leaders also have a role and an obligation to create the safe space. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is by being a little bit vulnerable and sharing how you are today as a leader, sharing your form score. So, whenever I do the form score thing, I always share my score first and what's driving it, good or bad. And that then creates the space for other people to follow suit. And you're right, then that does build momentum. And ultimately, we're looking to facilitate culture change here, and we need leaders engaged in it to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And Wendy, obviously, you've gone into quite a new role recently, in a pretty high growth organization. How have you, and how are you engaging with your teams, globally to ensure you kind of know how they are and where they are, and also getting to know them and building that kind of rapport and engagement where they know it's kind of safe to talk about maybe their feelings too?
Yeah, because they don't know me, they don't know how I operate yet. I've only just been there for 6 weeks now, starting to build that trust and that rapport with my team. But a lot of check-ins with them. Asking them how they are, for sure. And I actually asked that to one of my team the other day, and was really surprised at the response, because the floodgates opened. So, it is building that trust initially to let people know that they do have a safe space to really share. And I've also connected with many of the C-1. I did one-on-ones with every single person. It was over 50 of them. And I definitely asked that question on, on every meeting. And I wanted them to know that I was very approachable, and not just this person that they haven't seen or they probably won't see for a long time, but just trying to bring in that more connected feeling. So I think it's really important to make that effort. I didn't have to do that, but I felt it was really important to do that. Obviously the C-suite, of course, I interact with them often, but if I could cascade all the way down the organization, I would. I'd love to have the time to do that. But I like some of the things and initiatives that Sophie has initiated, and I've definitely touched base with her to get some ideas. I've also been using my network to try and find some courses that people can do online that will help them through these times. And I have found a couple of companies that have shared their training link with me for free for everybody to use, and also leveraging my contacts from previous. There's Opera, the company that we've worked with extensively at Red Hat, just to try and see what collateral they have. low cost. You know, I don't want to bring a huge cost into the company, but I do feel that it is necessary to actually have it at the top of your agenda.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's the thing, coming back to Sophie's point earlier, you mentioned, you know, you don't need to necessarily put huge budgets into this. Some of it, you know, is free. And obviously it's actually you empathizing and opening up those conduits of conversation. But how, when you do, and if you're an organization, you are budgeting, how do you measure whether a mental health initiative is successful? What are the matrix you're using to say, actually, you know what, this is worth us investing in? And maybe I will pose that to you first, Sophie, and then Rob, if you could maybe share what other organisations have done, because I think that's what a lot of organisations are grappling with right now. If we're going to spend, how do we measure it?
Sure, it's a really good question. And I think the honest answer is return on investment for things like mental health is a bit of a slow burner. You know, unlike other metrics that you can measure daily, weekly, or monthly, this one takes a bit of time for your efforts and influence to take positive effect. But I think there are things that you can keep an eye on, such as absenteeism rates. Are they falling? Are they rising? Things like your insurance claims and your insurance premiums, what's happening there? And ultimately, it's a very simple equation of the total savings that you get from less absence, less expense on medical claims and so on over the investment that you make. And because $1 of investment in this area goes an awful long way, I think far longer than some of the other people investments we make, the ROI equation is going to look very good, but it's just going to take a while to come through. But I would encourage us all actually to sort of challenge the need to metric this area, because I think just instinctively it has to be the right thing to do. And I think organizations need to have a social purpose almost around this whole area. Obviously, I know that business leaders need a commercial ROI at times, but I do think and I do hope that increasingly the metric will be less relevant than the value that these things can create for their colleagues and broader society as a result.
Yeah. And is that what you found also, Rob?
Yeah, Sophie, I totally agree. You know, this is the right thing to do, and we talk about our people are our greatest assets, and then invested more time servicing the photocopiers, you know, in certain cases. So there isn't a lot of data on ROI. Some organisations have measured it. So Anglian Water in the UK got an 8-to-1 return on their investment on all of their well-being and mental health initiatives. Deloitte's estimated it at 5-to-1 in the same report. But I think it's really interesting. The biggest cost of mental ill health for employers is not people off work sick, and it's also not people leaving the business and the hiring costs. It's presenteeism. It's people turning up to work every day but underperforming because of suboptimal mental health, and that far outweighs the cost. So in the UK numbers, 45 billion are the costs to employers as estimated by Deloitte. 29 billion of those is estimated as presenteeism. So it gives you a sense of the scale of the opportunity and the cost. So for me, there's a bit of a leap of faith there for leaders. But I think if we start creating a culture that prioritizes well-being, that rewards and celebrates people, that balance their lives effectively, that actually take their holidays, that take breaks in the day, that prioritize exercise, all of the good stuff, actually the results will speak for themselves, because we'll have a higher performing workplace. So I agree, Sophie, we shouldn't focus too much on ROI, but I know some CFOs will need to see that, and there is data there, but just not enough yet.
Yep. And Tiffany, from you know, hearing this from an organizational perspective, but from an employee perspective, what kind of, and forget that you work for GRIP at the moment, so I'm not going to take this personally, I think it's important to know, but generally, you know, from your own perspective, what kind of environment do you feel or culture makes it safe for you to be able to speak openly? So one of the questions just from the audience there was that if you are a 4 out of 10 or lower, what makes you feel comfortable in terms of sharing that with your manager?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, it would be, it depends on my relationship with the manager. You know, at the end of the day, for me, it's about how understanding and how sincere and genuine that manager is. If they've shown me that, then I would be more likely to open up because I genuinely feel that they care. You know, I've seen managers in the past where, you know, to what Sophie said, when they say, "How are you?" But that's followed by, "Oh, okay, so what tasks do you have? You know, what are you going to execute now? Or what's happening now? What's in your pipeline?" Which comes across as, okay, it's just, you're just asking for the sake of asking, and you don't really care about how I'm feeling. So I would suggest, if in the instance your manager, you're not comfortable in, you know, sharing how you feel with your manager, then my next option would be to, you know, share it with someone that you are comfortable with, that you feel that you can open up to them, and you don't feel that you'll be judged as a result. I think just simply you know, opening up to someone that you trust will do, you know, so much good for you, you know, and you don't feel like you need to coop it up inside. So I would suggest, you know, if there's a colleague that you're very close to that you feel like you're able to share, then it'd be best to share with them if you're comfortable.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. And Sophie, one of the other questions that's come up as well is in terms of just going back to the initiatives you've run and looking at regional differences. Have you found that some of the initiatives, you know, specifically from Asia, have been more impactful and resonated more in Asia versus others, if that makes sense? So what's been more effective, and what differences have you seen between regions when you're rolling out these kind of initiatives? Because I'm assuming it's not always a one size fits all.
Yeah, it's another great question. We've got 14 different countries just in the APAC region alone, and very different cultures, very different levels of stigmatization around the issue and so forth. So we've been very deliberate in our planning to offer propositions that work for those that are more introverted around the subject and want to personally find calm moments for themselves, like the Mindfi app, for example. That's a very private and personal resource. Panel sessions for those in more open and expressive cultures who want to come together and ask questions, share and learn in a group, to reading articles for those that are reflectors, to active training for those that want to develop the skill set. So I think the key thing when designing a wellness proposition, and it's more than just mental health, that's a big part of it, is to think through all the different personas that you've got, all the different cultures that you've got that need to consume this, and find something that can work for all. The one thing won't work for everybody, but having peppered solutions in a way will have the most value. And you'll find that certain cultures and certain types of people latch on to things more than others. And I think that's okay, providing there's something which is accessible to everyone, then you've added the value that you can.
Yep. Okay.
I think it's a really good point, Sophie. And even in the same culture, the resources that are required to help a broad workforce, it's really personal well-being. It's really individual, and somebody might need to focus on sleep, somebody might need to focus on dealing with anxiety, others might need to balance their timetable a bit better. And so offering that suite and that range of resources and with different language and learning styles, really important.
Great.
Okay. And another question from the audience: with the current climate, it's difficult to meet teams face to face. What's your advice on creating safe space and connecting with teams virtually? I'll leave that open if there's anyone that wants to take that first.
So for me, I've done a fair bit of supporting organisations on this, and I think, first of all, we need to create spaces that are around connection and not just around business issues. So using whatever your virtual technology is to allow colleagues to connect. I use a platform called Remo, which allows people to sit in kind of actual virtual tables and then hop around and network. But I think whatever platform you're using, it's really important to have just time for colleagues to replace those water cooler chats or informal coffees. And also, I think it's quite helpful to create spaces where well-being and mental health is on the agenda. So a lot of the events I've done for clients are, you know, a little presentation from the CEO, you know, a form score and a chat about well-being, discussions in little breakout rooms, and then, you know, a presentation from the well-being function on what benefits are available to the individuals, but a time to kind of decompress and chat in a space that's dedicated for that. I find that has worked really well during lockdown for a number of clients.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Anything to add, Sophie or Wendy, on that subject?
Yeah. We've done something called Connect4, which doesn't have the funky Remo platform, but that sounds pretty cool. So I'll look into that, Rob. So Connect4 is where we bring colleagues together, random 4 people who probably have never met or spoken physically or virtually before, often from different countries. And there are sort of conversation starter cards that they are given to break any awkward initial silences. And they're just a social space for people to come together, share how they're journeying through COVID, and offer some tips and advice to others. And we've had some really good feedback from that sort of way of bringing people together and connecting them in ways that they may not have otherwise have done before has been very beneficial. And again, that's completely free, no cost at all other than the administration around it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. Connect4, it just resonates, doesn't it?
It's like the game, if you remember the game.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's brilliant.
If there was one thing, because we've got a number of organisations or people within organisations at the moment watching today, if there's one thing an organisation was to implement tomorrow that didn't have anything in the way of mental health initiatives right now, what would you, and I'll put this to the Wendy, Rob and Sophie, what would you recommend that they do implement tomorrow?
So for me, yeah, it's, you know, everybody's saying to you, Paul, that's a really good question, because you are asking very thought-provoking questions, which is a good sign. There's a lot of things that you could do. If I had to pick one, I would say treat mental health and well-being as a strategic priority of the organization, and then let it flow from there. Because if you give it that priority in the organization, we can work out the other stuff. We can work out the training, the resources, the first aid, the panel events, the awareness raising stuff. But I think organizations that really do this well have grabbed hold of it at exco level and say, we are going to treat mental health and well-being as a priority of this organization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thanks, Rob.
I agree with Rob. It has to be at the highest level. You know, otherwise it's just not gonna work. You're not gonna get that buy-in, and you're not gonna provide a feeling of a safe space if the executive committee, you know, are not really supporting that, and people won't feel that they can speak up.
Agree. And I think the other angle to it is leaders role modeling the way, even if it's just gradually and over time, but sharing personal stories. If they're having a bad day, talk to their team about it, don't hold it back, because it's little moments like that that build up over time and start to turn the culture and start to make investment seem more important than it ever once was.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. So key thing is really that strategy from the top. So it needs to be driven from the top.
Mm.
I think it does. You know, you do see, you know, it come the other way with the groundswell and people building networks at the ground level, and passionate people are driving it. We need that as well. But I think you'll see the culture change much more quickly if leaders engage in it. And then you need that kind of everybody else in the organization getting behind it. And the thing is, in any culture, even more stigmatized cultures that we might find in Asia, you won't find a shortage of willing people to get behind the agenda from the employee base. Because this is, you know, one thing I can tell you, in any culture, whilst the stigma is very different, the mental health challenges are present. We all experience challenges to our mental health, and some of us will experience more serious challenges. What we want to be doing is creating an environment where those people can be open, but you'll find you've got passionate advocates and champions within any business as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's a really important point, because it does impact all of us. That is the reality. I don't think there's anyone out there that can say they've never had a bad day. And if they did, I'd be very jealous, but I think it's just unrealistic. So, okay. So if, and sorry, I'm just moving away from organizations a little bit. There's a lot of people that obviously are working from home. And I think obviously, hopefully things have begun to ease a little bit. I know there are particular challenges, and Tiffany, you shared before, when you're living alone and you're not able to go out and you're not able to meet people over, you know, extended periods of time, that can be quite challenging. So maybe Tiffany, I'll put this to you first, is what advice would you give to people who are working remotely, who aren't going into the office right now, but who are struggling? What kind of helped you during that period?
I would say do something or find out what it is that makes you happy. I've come to realize during my challenging period was what actually does make me happy to get back to what I was before. So for me personally, so I've been doing yoga for a long time. And the interesting part was I only understood the benefits of Shavasana, which is the lying down pose at the very end of yoga, like the benefits of it. And that was really to basically feel aligned and feel at peace with yourself. It also gives you a good opportunity to also reflect, but in a very calm way. So for me, if yoga works, or whatever activity or exercise or whatever, or if it's meditation, that should be part of your routine to help you go through it. So for me personally, I was doing yoga like every day, and I found that even if it was just 15 minutes before bedtime or in the morning, it would just completely relax me, and it would just make my day so much more smoother and make me feel that problems weren't as big as they seem to be, because I guess there's a lot of people who have it like worse off at the moment. So it just puts things into perspective. So I would suggest find something that can help you calm you down.
Yeah. Okay. And there's been a lot of discussion, I think, or a lot of people have been focusing on broader wellness. And I read recently that Oprah has a gratitude journal that she writes in every day, and she, swears by. Now, some people don't subscribe to that, and I'll open this just generally to the panel. I mean, how important do you think having those broader wellness initiatives around, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's, having a gratitude journal and thinking about what you appreciate, how important is that towards mental health? And is it something that you subscribe to and you've individually subscribed to during this period?
So for me, I think that this gets into the debate of kind of prevention versus support. And a lot of mental health initiatives will be around supporting people who have already become ill or approaching burnout or have a mental health challenge. Whereas that will be a population of the employee base that we need to support. But actually, the majority of your population base will be neither thriving nor struggling. They will have moderate mental health or might be languishing. And so actually, what do you want to do? Do you want to wait till somebody goes into the distress to support them? Or do you want to offer tools that help people stay well or move more towards the thriving end? So anything proactive, and that's from exercise, mindfulness, to nutrition, to support groups, to social connections within the organization. All of these things apply to everybody, not just the people who are struggling. So it's really important to engage with the fullness of the workforce. And I think the aim here is to keep everybody well and give everyone the best chance towards thriving. And that's where some of the tools that you mentioned, gratitude diaries being one of them, are really important. But I think we want to be able to be inspiring, engaging, and getting people proactively managing their mental health wherever they might be on that continuum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Sophie, were you going to add something? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, we introduced the gratitude journal as part of our Thriving Remotely piece of work, where we asked colleagues, or we invited them to write down a few things they were most grateful for in any given day. And I went through that as well. And I must confess, I haven't kept it going, and note to self to pick it back up again. But when I was doing it, I actually found myself at the end of the day having quite a big smile on my face, even on the more darker days, because I'd realized that actually we go through our busy days from meeting to meeting and don't often pause for thought on what's gone really well or what we're really grateful for. And when we give that a moment's thought and write it down, it's very satisfying and heartwarming to read. So I think these things may sound small, but they actually build up over time and start to change behaviors around reframing, negative thoughts to more helpful thoughts, that in turn boosts somebody's mental well-being levels. So I think they are important.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And this is just something, I suppose, if I think about my experience over the years, you know, it's times I've been told, or organizations have said, or leaders have said, you know what, you should leave your personal issues at the door when you come into the office. And, you know, when you come into the office, actually, you know, just be professional, you know, focus on work. Now, obviously there's a lot of movement behind bringing your whole selves to work, you know, which clearly is very important. Now, in an environment though, where, and I think mentally there is that mental switch when you're going into a physical office, it's easier sometimes to actually switch from, right, I'm kind of in work mode right now. Okay. And if it's, and you can manage those challenges maybe a little easier between giving yourself a bit of compartmentalization. However, now when you're working at home and home is the office, how do you make that mental shift? Is it possible to make that mental shift if you're not feel productive? So I know we say, okay, well, it's okay to not feel okay, and I can potentially talk about that, and that should help. But how would you recommend people make that mental shift from home to work when work often is become at home now?
It's a good question, because we're all living at work at the moment, which is a somewhat strange concept in itself. I think it's finding a ritual that works for you, that separates home from work. And for some of us, you know, we don't have the luxury of having isolated rooms where we can sit and work all day and shut the door and forget about it. Many of us are on kitchen tables with our partners and extended family. So it is really hard. And I think we have to acknowledge that. But little rituals, like rather than leaving the laptop open and running or in sleep mode, shut it down, unplug it, put it in a drawer, make a cup of tea, get a bite to eat, and know that means the working day has stopped. I think it's just finding very small rituals that you can build in a way that works for you, and sort of forcing your mind to think like that, because it's very tempting when your work equipment is just 1 meter away 24/7 to keep working. But the reality is we just can't continue like that. It's unsustainable. And then we tip into fatigue and burnout, which obviously has a whole heap of issues around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Sophie. I'm loving everything you say, by the way. But what has been removed from lockdown is the forced breaks that we get, particularly the commute, which is the buffer between home and work. And that enables you to sort of decompress before entering into home life, particularly if you've got a family. So, and those breaks going from one meeting to another, we've destroyed those, and we're going from one Zoom straight to the next. So I think we need to be more disciplined and have self-discipline as to how we're structuring that demarcation between work and home. And that could be go for a 10-minute walk outside after you finished your working day and replace that commute and just allow your mind to reset. The other point, though, I think, is putting your work game on. I think one thing that the pandemic has showed us is, look, we're all human. We can't really demark work and home, and we shouldn't have to. Actually, we're good at what we do because of who we are, not just because of a face we put on in the workplace. And again, my hope here is that we can all just be a bit more human, because if we're struggling with mental health because we've gone through a divorce or a bereavement or whatever's going on outside of the workplace, that will affect our ability to do our job, right? So we've got to look at people in the whole. And I think we shouldn't have to put that game face on, but I do think we need to demark between how we're working at home and family time, for example.
Yep. Thanks. Sorry, Wendy?
Yeah, add to that. I think I demarcate the day is I'm very fortunate that Crypto.com's headquarters are in Hong Kong, so on the same time zone. And it's great not to have loads of evening calls. So 6 o'clock comes, if I've got everything finished, I close the laptop and I go and put my walking gear on and I go out for that hour's walk. So that helps me decompress and then come back and then start dinner. So that sort of helps me, create that line in the sand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. And so just one question for each of you actually on the panel is, from your perspective, if there's, what's the best piece of advice you think you could give someone to manage their mental health if they're feeling low at the moment?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Rob, on you go.
No, you go, please, Sophie.
I think it's about keeping perspective and knowing what you can control and accepting what you can't control, and what you can't control, not trying to find ways to start controlling it, because the reality is you just can't. And there's a lot of things in the world today that are out of our control. And when you overthink that area, it can become quite alarming. So I think focus on what you can control, the small pleasures of life, the warm cup of tea you can have, your favorite biscuit, the bird on your windowsill. These things may sound very small and basic, but they'll bring you some joy, and they will keep a sense of perspective. And I think what we all need right now is that sense of perspective to pull us through this very crazy period.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Sophie. You've acceptance and perspective, two of the things I was definitely going to talk about. So I'll give you another one. But I'll use the words of my 6-year-old daughter at the time when I started talking about mental health. And we had a conversation about it. And I was asking her, what would you do if you woke up one day and you were feeling sad and you weren't feeling yourself? You didn't want to play. You didn't want to do the things you normally want to do. And she looked at me like I was asking a really obvious question. She said, Daddy, I would find someone who I love and I would tell them. I would talk.
Oh.
And then I said, Gabby, if you went to school and you saw a friend sitting off in the playground, what would you do? You know, she was looking sad or he was looking sad, not themselves. And this time she looked at me like I was a complete and utter idiot. She said, Daddy, I would go over and I'd ask if they're okay. And so for me, I think very simply, if you're struggling with your own mental health, find someone who you can trust and talk to them. Don't bottle it up. But if we see those behavior changes, and it's a bit more difficult over remote, but we can still see them, check in with someone and ask them, how are you today? And say, look, I'm here for you. Let's have a virtual cup of tea or meet up for a walk, or whatever we can do. But, you know, let's act on those prompts that we're really fortunate enough to see in our work colleagues.
Thanks, Rob. Wendy?
No, nothing to add. I think they've covered it.
Tiffany?
I mean, just to add a little bit more to reach out to your, your strong network of, family, friends. I think, being an expat myself, like I don't have any family here. So, having, those friends around and, constantly be in contact with them and, also like appreciating all the things that you currently have and being grateful for it definitely does make the day brighter.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we will open up some questions. We've got a few questions from the audience at the moment. So if there are any questions, please do send them through. So question here from Mike is, how should SMEs balance these mental wellness programs with business survival? So there's a lot of challenges with companies at the moment that are really focused on, you know what, we need to make money to ensure that we can actually even stay open. So how important is it at this juncture, given the challenges businesses are facing?
I'm happy to give that one a go. So we're doing the same, Sophie.
Yeah. On you go. You go.
So for me, and it's a really difficult challenge, isn't it? Because we've got to survive from a business point of view, and that businesses have to do what it takes to survive. I think part of that survival plan is actually equipping the people that are doing the surviving for the business to do that effectively. So we do have to equip them and prioritize their well-being and help them do so. So I think it's about a balance thing. So we've got to be able to give the resources, give the education on how to balance stress, how to prioritize sleep. So I think giving some time and effort to the agenda alongside saving the business or pivoting the business. And I think going into it with a positive mindset, right? I think that creativity comes out of these challenges. So I think empowering people to deal with these challenges with a sense of creativity where possible, but equipping them with a bit of literacy and education on how to manage it. And there's loads of great resources that you don't need to spend too much time in disseminating to the workforce. So I think prioritizing time of leadership towards that is important, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Agree, Rob. And I think if an organization is in survival mode, then employees in that organization will feel more angst, more worry, more vulnerability about job security and so forth. So actually the whole topic of mental health becomes even more paramount, and it might be that there's no money to invest or not much time to give to other things than saving the business's operations. But as we've all said, some of these things don't cost any money and take very little time, and they have very powerful benefits.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And okay, what does an organisation that truly supports mental health look like? So Rob, maybe I'll pose that to you, just given the work you've done with various organisations.
Yeah, thank you. And I put a link in the chat on an article I wrote on what an integrated strategy looks like. But for me, you've got three main elements as I see them: support, awareness, and prevention. So we need to create an environment where people feel open talking about their mental health and their challenges. We need to then offer support with resources, whether that's employee assistance programs, in-house therapists, that are there to support people when they're struggling. But then we need to create this program of prevention or promotion of positive health, which means we can support all of the organization. So it's a pretty integrated strategy, and it's underpinned by the culture. So none of it is going to work unless you've got the culture in place. So for that, you need leadership engagement, you need prioritization of the issue. And you need to invest time and resource to it. It doesn't always need to be money, but it does investing time and resource to it. And I think the most forward-thinking organizations I see have got individualized, personalized well-being budgets with choice available as to where those budgets go and guidance on how to help spend that budget, with a culture that people feel very comfortable speaking out with, in-house resources where appropriate to support those people, external if not. But it's kind of integrated strategy. But I think, we've just got to make a start really as well. So whilst that might be the utopia, and even the utopia is not near the top of the mountain, to mix my metaphors, we actually just need to get on the path and start prioritizing this and implementing some training and, having some talks and creating some awareness. But we do need to think of all those three buckets, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. And for those organizations that have implemented mental health initiatives, are there any particular tools that you would recommend right now that organizations look at?
Yeah, I think from there's a myriad of tools really, and looking at some of the mindfulness apps and stuff like that is good to have in place. There's some good platforms like Unmind, for example, which is a good digital platform. There's the form score methodology that I'm introducing. But I think really it's about looking at what's important to your organization and thinking, right, which aspects of the whole well-being plethora of resources that are out there do we need to focus on? And you've got to ask your people, right? You've got to find out what's you've got to survey your people. If it's sleep, then we'd want to bring in Sleepio or some resources that are good for sleep. So I think it's very difficult to just put a blanket resource in place without engaging with your employees. And I'm sure, Sophie, you've had to do a bit of that on your journey.
Agree, Rob. Agree with everything you've said. You've outlined it very well.
We agree too much, Sophie. It needs a bit more controversial, this panel, Paul. We need to find something to disagree on.
Wendy, do you want to play that role? Anything you want to disagree with? Or...
No, it's too big. Might be beyond.
All right. Okay, well, I think we're nearly up now. So thank you very much for taking part in the panel. I think the core takeaways seem to be really about organisations driving this from the top. It seems that, yes, mental health is an initiative that should be done for the wellness of your organisation, but obviously that has a clear commercial impact if that's done in the right way for your organization, if you need any other reason. I think it sounds like it's about people ensuring that they do have people they can speak to. So yes, from a top-down approach, it's creating a culture where it's actually safe, that people feel that they can actually talk about if they've got challenges. But from a bottom-up approach, it's actually trying to find like-minded individuals that hopefully can instigate change. And also more importantly, if they're feeling isolated, have someone they can speak to about that. for their own personal wellness. And then it's, you know, the other things I think around tools aren't necessarily cost tools. It's about, you know, appreciation, gratitude, and thinking what's going well, you know, with your life, as opposed to just dwelling on maybe what the challenges are right now. We have recorded this, so we will send this recording out to those that attended, to the panelists. Also, there were a number of others that weren't able to attend that we'll send this to. And if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to myself, to the panel. But listen, thank you very much to Sophie, Rob, Wendy and Tiffany for being part of the panel today. And thank you all for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.